Hello, this is Tytti Vanhala, an Associate Groundwork Trainer for Art2Ride. This is my second self-critique video of one of my full training sessions with Pöly from the end of July. I got critiqued for the first video by my fellow associate trainers and Will, and here I'm showing how I have implemented the advice I got from them. First of all, I start with in-hand work before lunging. This is to activate his back and get him stretching before the lunge work. This is what Will and all the other associate trainers recommended for me. Well, that is, unless your horse is not calm and you just cannot work well with them in hand, then you should actually lunge first a while and then return to the in-hand work when you feel that you have a control over your horse in walk. Here I'm just concentrating on walking in a good rhythm with him, staying by his shoulder as well. I'm also encouraging him to walk more forward. He was a little slow on the previous video, so now I'm really paying attention that he's moving on. Another thing that Will and the other associate trainers, well actually including me, commented on was to keep my outside rein contact more constant. And that is actually what I'm concentrating on here all the time, as you can probably see. And well, here he loses concentration a little bit. He wants to stop and say hello to DJ who's filming. But there you could also see how I just kept the outside rein contact even though he lifted his head up. And as you can see, I'm doing a lot less dramatic sideways movements in this session, so it's a lot more subtle things that I'm doing. This was another advice I got, sometimes less is more. So I'm keeping the in-hand work here a lot more fluent between sideways and walking forward in a stretch. And so I'm just doing a couple of steps of leg yield, and then I go forward into a stretch, and then I'm asking a little bit of shoulder forward, and then again to a nice forward walking stretch. As you can see here, I'm doing a little bit of shoulder forward, and then it's turning more into a leg yield here. And then I'm just asking him to move on forward straight. So it's a lot more fluent, and actually he's behaving on this session, he's behaving a lot nicer than last time. He was a lot easier to work for as well and work with as well, and he didn't want to lean on me actually hardly at all, so for me it was a lot easier session as well. And you can see indeed that I'm continuously concentrating on the outside rein as well. When I pass, you can see how there's no slack anymore, and he's yielding a lot nicer as well. There's again a little bit of yield here, and I think soon I've decided, like, okay, this is actually enough on this side. I was aiming for about 5 minutes work on in hand both sides. So this is about how much I want to do. And here you can see me adjusting my hands. So I tend to hold the reins with my palms upwards, and my whip goes between my thumb and my index finger, and then my middle finger and ring finger. So you can see that it's pointing more backwards and downwards, so I can reach his side a lot better than if I would hold it any other way. And as you can see, I'm indeed continuously making sure that I have a contact on the outside rein and that it does not slack in any moment. It's not tight either, but I tended indeed to slack with it quite a lot in my previous video, and he tended to go through his outside shoulder because there was no outside rein contact on him then. Thus now I'm keeping a much keener eye on it, as I've said earlier. You can also see me adjusting the outside rein fairly often on his neck. This is because it tends to run down his neck when he stretches, and then when he lifts his head it does end up close to his poll, and that's why I keep on adjusting it by lifting it closer to his wither area, or well, in fact it's right in the front of the wither area where my hand is, so I want to keep it there. I don't want it to slide closer to his poll, which would mean also that I would walk in front of him rather than by his shoulder where I would like to be. My inside hand is following his head, as you can see, and I'm keeping contact with that as well. Furthermore, I'm concentrating on keeping a little distance between him and me, so that he's not crowding me and I'm not crowding him either, so we give each other a little bit space. And yeah, indeed I'm also paying attention that I'm walking at his shoulder and not getting ahead of him anymore as I used to do. I'm also not stopping this time anywhere, but you can see me going on and just adjusting my position on the go. That was another point that my fellow trainers made for me, that I should just keep on going and adjusting as I go. I can understand that in the beginning, when the horse is new to the work, and also when you are new to the in-hand, that then you would actually then it would be easier to stop every now and then and kind of recoup yourself and move on again. But once you are more used to the work, and once the horse is more used to the work, then it's actually better to just go and adjust as you go. And of course the other issue that I had with the previous video was that he was a tad slow with in hand, so here I'm also asking him to move more forward, far more actively. So I'm actually using my whip a little bit more, but I'm not asking him to move on or go sideways with just the whip, but I'm also encouraging him with my voice as well, which you can't hear now obviously because I've silenced the video itself to have this voiceover. So here you can actually see a very nice shoulder fore in hand from Pöly. He's maybe a tad bit too much bent on his neck, but otherwise I was very pleased with that. So I think I'm gonna stop soon with this in-hand work. Yeah, you see me. I thought that was so good. He was responding so well that I decided that that's it, and he's done a good job and earned his little sugar cube as well. Then to our lunging part of this session. In general, Will's main comment on my previous video was to use more of the small circle work to check Pöly's speed, which is just above his optimal, Will said. I got the same advice from my fellow trainers as well, that is to use that small circle work to ask for him to yield his hindquarters and step more under and become more supple laterally, and indeed at the same time slow down a little. So here you see me starting on the lunge, and I've been really insisting on him for him to walk on the lunge first, so I'm not letting him trot anymore. as he would like to do. I've also timed it this time that I would walk about 5 minutes before I ask for trot. And I'm still quite close to him to keep the contact and ask for him to move forward. And well, every time he goes to trot like this, I just ask him back to walk, and I just insist that he walks. And I have to say, it's getting a lot better. I mean, you see in the beginning how he really, just a tiny bit of pressure and he wants to go to trot, but this time I'm not having it. So I also actually want him to walk in a bigger circle, but I'm not getting the response what I want all the time at the moment. So I ask him to move on a little bit, but I also want to keep the contact. So there's a fine line there, because if I ask too much, he just jogs on, and then like here, and then I just have to wait for him to come back to walk. But it's all getting better, as I said. And he opens his mouth, as you can see, a couple times here. And as I say, it's his way of protesting and saying that he doesn't quite agree with me, or that he doesn't feel fully comfortable in the work I'm asking him to do. He doesn't really do it very often. I also thought whether to put the line over his pole, but he's actually more comfortable with the line coming straight from the inside bit ring. And when he settles, he keeps his mouth pretty much closed. But if I put the line over the pole, he tends to chew on his bit quite a lot, like continuously. So he does use his mouth a lot more that when the line goes over the pole. So I like having the line straight from the bit ring because of that. But obviously if he would charge around and open his mouth all the time, I would put the line over the pole. And I have done that, and I do it when it's required, but it's not that often. So yeah, here I'm just insisting on the walk indeed. It's getting a little bit difficult here, and when I put the pressure, he just wants to take the easier way out, and he also goes quite empty on my hand. So that's why I take him to a very small circle to be closer to him and keep the contact. So he was basically avoiding the contact there, but he responds really well, as you saw there, and he kind of gave up and goes into really nice relaxed walk, which I immediately rewarded there. And he even continues to walk in a bigger circle and stretches really nicely, so that looks really nice and relaxed. So I thought that he just had to have his final say, his final strop, and then he just decided like, okay, well now I can walk in peace and quiet, that's fine. Yeah, and I have been actually aiming to do some small circle yielding work in the walk as well, but as you can see, it's really difficult at the moment, since any extra pressure I put on him, he turns into a jog instead of a shoulder 4. So here I'm just aiming for a nice forward pace and relaxed walk with a stretch down and out, and for him to not look outside. And I get some really nice stretches and a really nice movement. And you can see how quiet he is with his mouth when he's relaxed. He's come a really long way with that as well. And then he gets a bit distracted when the ponies were coming out past him, but that's quite minor, just has a look and that's it. And while lunging here, I was also pondering that I could actually try some side trains on him one day. He has not had side reins on yet at all, so I thought it might be nice to try how he works with them. And it's been a long time since we used the shambone as well, so it would be maybe an interesting thing to try and see how he would stretch on the side reins. So I've been pretty pleased with the walk work. He's ever so slightly every now and then a little bit distracted, and head comes up every now and then, but he stays mainly in walk. So here I go with the trot work then, since the walk work was proceeding so well. And in general, I'm putting more pressure on him to really yield his hindquarters, and ask him to kind of move forward. So that's why he kind of disagrees with me here in the beginning of the trot work. And you can see he's opening his mouth a couple times, like there, a little bit. Obviously it would be good to have the line over his poll then, but it's just a couple of moments he does that, and otherwise it's quite settled. So I do feel that he has improved a lot since the previous video, and there was about maybe a week between this video and the first video. I'm just doing this voiceover a little bit later. And after I started to ask more from him with the smaller circle and yielding exercises, he's really improved. So he's not that straight on the circle anymore. Well, I don't think I asked for that canter there. I just asked some more movement, and he just picked up the canter instead of moving forward better. So I think I will be starting here I go with the small circle work. So you see me shorten my lunge line, and I basically stop walking so to bring him into a small circle. At the same time I push him on to yield with his hind end. And at the beginning he's really feeling it and finding it difficult. So you can see how he lifts his head and resists and increases the pace instead of yielding and slowing down and reaching better. But he settles pretty fast this time. Yeah. So there we are, that looks already a lot better. He's paying attention and he's starting to yield. Starting to yield quite nicely. Starting to work. So there we go. That's looking pretty good. I'm sure you can see how he's shifting his hindquarters a bit outwards. There. So it's kind of a shoulder 4 on the lunge line. So I was pretty pleased with that, so I let him go on a slightly bigger circle there. So as you can see, he's starting to bend laterally and his pace has slowed down. Even though he's finding it difficult, he's really trying hard for me. So that's great. I noticed in the beginning that his step is getting a little bit shorter right in the beginning when I'm asking him to do this quite hard work for him. But in the end he starts to flow a lot better, which is really good. So his rhythm is a lot better and he's bending quite nicely. And here you can indeed see how quiet he's with his mouth when he settles into the work. So he's not really gaping out anymore. And so that's all looking quite nice and flowing. And here I think I'm asking for canter. Just a little bit of canter deliberately to see how it is after the harder work with the small circle. It's not really brilliant, but it's okay. he's stretching a little bit into it. He's finding it pretty hard though. And yeah, it's okay considering the surface, which is very dry and hard at that time, and so on. And after that hard work, and obviously I'm not doing very much of a canter, or much of it all, just a round or two. And after the canter, I just go back to the small circle work, as you see here. He's responding a lot better already. He's not really resisting or being opinionated. He's quite yielding quite nicely. He understands what I want, and it's obviously a bit easier for him. He looks really nice, at least on occasion. Sometimes he tends to run away a little bit there, but he comes back to the work pretty nicely. Since he's giving me a really nice bend on the circle with some lovely rhythm so quickly, I just start to walk him to a bigger circle to reward him for it. So he's bending on the circle, he has nice rhythm, he's calm with his mouth, and he has a nice stretch. So it's all really good here. And so I just let him go on a bigger circle, and I leave the hard work at that. Although obviously I keep an eye on his going, and I make sure that he keeps on working anyways. And I really think that that's really splendid trot work from him, and he's kind of getting totally in the zone there. So I think I'm pretty soon letting him come back to walk. Oh, there we are. I let him come back to walk for a little bit. So, and the walk is really nice as well. It's not hugely deep stretch, but he's going forward really nice, and he's still relaxed with it, and he's not resisting. And that's a bit of a nicer stretch as well. It's releasing his neck a little bit more. So what I'm starting to do here is I'm starting to see if I can do a little bit of shoulder 4 also in the walk, since it didn't work in the beginning, but I thought now that okay, let's see if you can do it after the trot work. So that's what I'm asking here, and he's actually responding very nicely there. You see that? That was really nice. So there I stop on this rein. He's responded so well. That's great. So that was a change of rein after a sugar cube moment. I also untangled my lunge whip. As you saw, it got a little bit tangled there. That's a kind of a lightweight telescope whip, which has a swiveling rings in the end, holding the rope part of the whip. So you can imagine the whip is so well used for about a year, so that the rope is beginning to really be worn out and tangles easily itself. So in fact, I've just now managed to change the rope to a new one, so I'll hope it'll hold for at least half a year before I have to change it. It's just dragging it around in the sand so many times a week really does wear out any rope. So that's what happened here. So I start exactly the same way on this rein as well. This is the slightly more difficult side for him. So again, I aim at about 5 minutes of walking at first, and just keeping him in the walk. The first times I did this, insisting on him walking, I think I had to ask him to come back to walk almost like every 5 seconds. So this is really pretty good going from him now, because I don't have to ask him that often. And the sun is setting, so DJ had to walk on the other side of the school there to keep on filming, so it doesn't so that you can actually see me working with him. You can also see from my trouser legs how dry the school actually is. It has been an unusually dry summer over here, and the ground went really hard in June. He reacted to the school surface having no bounce at all by not wanting to trot while ridden and not wanting to canter on the lunge either. So it took us a little time to pinpoint the reason for this type of resistance with him. We thought about the saddle, we thought about muscle stiffness issues and so on, as well as the hard ground obviously. But it became very clear that it was solely due to the ground conditions when it rained one day a lot. And the school became very soft all of a sudden. And then he was back to his normal self, both with the canter on the lunge and trot while ridden. After that, we were mindful about cantering him on the lunge or trotting while ridden when the ground hardened again, when it stopped raining. The walk work here is pretty good for him, and he's stretching quite nicely to it. For him, that is. He tends to bend his neck though a little too much to the inside and pop his outside shoulder outwards. I'm trying to I'm trying to correct it by asking him to yield his hind end a bit more. But it's obviously not very easy to keep him from falling into trot when I do that. Here you can see the bending of his neck extensively inside instead of just following with the whole of his body. So I'm asking him here to just get on with it and move his hind a bit and lowering, which he does react to, but then again, as you see, he falls into trot quite easily when I put a little bit more pressure on him to work. But on the other hand, he does respond pretty okay. And here you just see me trying to keep the balance between him walking forward nicely and stretching into it and not popping his outside shoulder outwards too much, and keeping him from trotting. But here you see I got a nice response for him, so I decided, like, okay, we have had enough walk anyway, so let's go to do some trot work. I would still say that his pace in trot here is a little bit too high, and he's still tending to step short, but he's improving with the work. So I do the same here as on the other hand. I just start with just letting him go on a large circle the way he wants, just to get him moving and trotting on, and seeing how he is, if he's improved or not, and how he is today compared to the previous session. So yeah, you can see here that he was I took him to a slightly smaller circle there than previously, and I put a little bit more pressure on his hindquarters, seeing if he would start yielding him a little bit in a bigger circle. But instead of that, he just picks up a canter, and here you can really see the way too fast pace for him. So after I tried a couple of rounds of that, I thought, let's see if he reacts in a bigger circle if I ask him to yield, because his yielding exercises have gone really well the previous day. So I thought I'd try it, but it doesn't work. As you could see, he just increased his pace and picked up a canter as well, if preferred. So I do the same thing here now. I shortened the line, I stopped walking in a bigger circle, and I'm just asking him to work in a lot smaller circle. But note that this the size of this circle is slightly larger than on the other side. I'm initially at least keeping it a little bit bigger on the left rein for him, because I know that it is his harder side for him to work on. So I'm keeping it a little bit lighter for him, so enable him to work a little bit easier on it. And you can see that he's responding pretty well. And in the beginning you could see how he was excessively turning inwards his head and really felt uncomfortable. But I just quietly insisted on it. Just keep a little bit of pressure on his hindquarters and just ask him to, work and lower his head. Here you can see the same reaction as in the beginning. That he finds it difficult. That's why he's doing it, and he's trying to avoid the work. But he does respond, and when he responds, I kind of walk a little bit bigger circle, as you see here as well. So I release the pressure of the small circle a little bit for him, so that he can relax a little bit more when he's working correctly. So whenever he yields, I walk him into a slightly bigger circle, and when I see him that he's stopped working, he brings his hindquarters more to the inside of the circle, then I just stop like here and bring him back to a smaller circle and ask him to more actively yield his hind and stretch into it. And once he does give it to me, I'll just start walking in a bigger circle. And whenever he does that, as you see here, he's lifting his head, looking in, I'm just holding my position and just ask him to yield and get on with it. So this is how you would see a horse who's quite stiff and quite new to this kind of yielding exercises in a smaller circle. This is how you would expect them to kind of react in the beginning, because it is quite hard work for them, especially if they are stiff. It's really hard work for them to step under and yield and do a little bit of shoulder fore in such a small circle. So you have to be considerate as well for your horse when it happens. So keep maybe a little bit bigger small circle, so to say, but you can stay a little bit closer to the horse as well. But here you see I've gone in the little bit bigger circle now. I give him more lunge line, but I'm still trying to ask him to yield in a bigger circle with me away from here. Oh, and there you see a bit of a fly in front of us. Luckily it went away. So I tried again what I tried in the beginning was that I gave him more lunge line, and I asked him to yield still in that longer, slightly bigger circle, but it didn't help. So I brought him back in a smaller circle, or I went closer to him, and I think this canter I actually asked for, just to see if a canter would help him to loosen up a little bit more. And I think it does improve a little bit. He's going, so that was maybe worth it. But you can see here how much more supple he is compared to our last video commentary on him from June. So it does help, and every time he's responding better and is more supple on the small circle and yields his hindquarters better. So it is really doing what I want him to do. And here I'm just running him into a bigger circle, because I want him to have a bigger circle, but at the same time I want to be slightly closer to him to control his hindquarters, so that it doesn't happen what happened before. You saw that he just increased his pace, and and basically stopped working properly. So this is why I'm running a little bit with him in a bigger circle, because I want him to have a little bit more space and a little bit more, as I said, it's a little bit easier for him, but at the same time I want him to work, obviously. So this is what I thought, okay, I'll just run with him. And you can see that it did help a lot. So he didn't start increasing his speed, but he stayed in a nice pace and kept working well on a bigger circle. So that was good. So I thought, okay, I'll try and see how he reacts now. And this is my last small circle work on this session. So and that was pretty brief, as you saw, because he reacted really nicely. He didn't really he did not really protest, and he kept on working. So that was very brief, just a round or two, and then I released him in a bigger circle and asked for a walk. So I found that was really good work from him, considering that that was his worst side, and he's always found that difficult. And here in the end I'm just asking the same thing from him as on the other side, except I'm here concentrating on walking him in a much bigger circle. I'm aiming almost around the whole school in a big oval. So you see me, I was really taking longer steps myself to try to push him into a bigger circle, and it did partially help, but he also made him inclined to start trotting. So I decided, okay, I better take smaller steps in the end. And I just want to give him a nice relaxing walk for the end. But obviously also keeping an eye on how his hindquarters are working. So I don't want him to go back to very being straight on the lunge line, on the circle, so to say. And you can still see that he's tending to bend his neck a little bit too much instead his body. So it's still work in progress, of course, as always, but I find that he's really improved a lot with this type of small circle, big circle work. Very fluent. So that was very pleased with this session in the end. I hope this was educational for you guys, and I hope it has helped. I hope it has helped for you to see how you can work with your own horse at your own place. Thanks for watching and listening, and until next time, bye.